"She's dead weight," I heard my daughter say with a cold finality that froze my blood. "I'm so tired of taking care of her. Once she's gone, we can sell the house and split the money. The property alone is worth at least $750,000. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." That was my daughter Rebecca, talking to her husband just a few feet from my hospital bed. There wasn't a hint of emotion in her voice. No sadness, no grief, not even guilt. Just the mechanical calculation of someone waiting for an inconvenience to be removed from their life. I should have died. That's what the oncologist told me 6 months earlier when he delivered the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer with a 5% survival rate. 6 months at most, he'd said, his voice gentle but firm. "We can try aggressive treatment, but you should prepare your affairs." But somehow I hadn't died yet. And in that moment, as I lay there with my eyes closed, unable to move but fully conscious, I was grateful for my stubborn heart. Because I needed to hear this, needed to know the truth before it was too late. My body was immobile, but my mind was racing. 1,000 thoughts crashed into each other, memories colliding with this new, horrible reality. No sound escaped my lips. Only the steady beep of the monitor beside me revealed I was still alive, still present, still listening. Her husband, David, shifted in his chair. I heard leather creak as he leaned forward. "What about the will?" he asked quietly. "Have you checked it recently?" Rebecca laughed softly. "If she has one, it's ancient. Dad's been gone for 8 years, and I doubt she ever updated it. Everything's in her name. It's just a matter of time." Time. Such a funny word. The very thing they thought was running out for me was suddenly the only resource I had left. And I intended to use every second of it. I don't remember much else from that day. My eyes never opened. My fingers never twitched. But something ancient and powerful awakened inside me. Not anger, not grief. Something colder and sharper, like steel pulled from ice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I suppose there comes a point in every parent's life when they realize they've become invisible. Not to the world, not yet, but to the people closest to them, the people who once looked up to them as if they had painted the stars with their own hands. Your relevance fades. Your voice dims. Suddenly, your presence becomes background noise. A figure at the edge of family photographs. A chair that's always occupied but never truly noticed. Rebecca wasn't always like this. There was a time she would run barefoot across the yard just to jump into my arms when I came home from work. She used to make me construction paper cards covered in glitter and stick figure drawings with the words, "Mom is my hero," scrawled in crayon. I kept one in my wallet for 30 years. I wonder when she stopped seeing me that way. Was it when her father died? When the house grew quieter? Or was it the slow accumulation of my silence, my unwillingness to demand attention, my quiet sacrifices that she took for granted? I gave her everything I could. Paid for her college education, bought her first car, co-signed for her mortgage when she and David couldn't qualify on their own. I gave so much that I never stopped to ask whether she understood the weight of it. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe it was easier to believe she still remembered who I was beneath the gray hair and hospital gowns. But that afternoon, that one overheard conversation killed something in me. Not my spirit. That was very much alive. But the part of me that still foolishly hoped I was loved the way I had loved. That part died right there in that hospital bed. They stayed in the room for another 15 minutes, talking in low voices, checking their phones, arguing briefly about whether David should call a real estate agent yet. He thought it was too soon. She said I wouldn't want the house to sit empty. Ironic, considering I was the one who had bought that property 35 years ago, renovated every inch of it myself after their father died, and planted the cherry trees in the backyard that still bloom magnificently every spring. And here I was, still breathing, just 5 feet away from them. When they finally left, I listened to the fading sound of Rebecca's heels clicking down the corridor. That rhythm used to make me smile. Now it made my jaw clench. A nurse came in later. Her name was Elena. I remember her scent, lavender and clean cotton. She adjusted my IV and hummed softly as she checked my vitals. When she leaned over me, I tried desperately to move my fingers, to give some sign that I was awake. Nothing happened, but something in my brain began to light up again. like a fuse burning slowly towards something explosive. The next few days passed in a blur, but I was conscious for more of it than anyone realized. Every conversation, every assumption made in my supposed absence, every callous detail they thought was safe to discuss out loud. I heard it all. I learned more about my daughter in those 3 days of silence than I had in 10 years of phone calls and obligatory Sunday dinners. She had plans, elaborate ones. Selling the house quickly, taking the money, moving to Phoenix. David wanted a new boat. She wanted to invest in a vacation rental. "We can finally start that Airbnb business," she said, laughing. You know how people love authenticity with a sad backstory. A sad backstory. That's what I had become. An old woman in a hospital bed waiting to die. A chapter to be closed, a line item in their financial planning. It was during one of those afternoons that I began to form the outline of a plan. Nothing dramatic, nothing vengeful. I wouldn't confront her, I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't even raise my voice. No, my daughter wanted the house. She wanted my legacy converted to cash. She wanted a clean slate. So I would give her one. But not in the way she expected. It took another week before I could move my hand. The first twitch nearly made Elena drop her clipboard. "Mrs. Caldwell," she gasped. "Can you hear me?" I blinked once, twice. She called for the doctor. Then things moved quickly. Scans, tests, more blinking. One nurse called me the miracle lady. But they didn't know what kind of miracle I truly was. Rebecca showed up the next day with flowers and a plastic smile. "Mom! Oh my God, you're awake. I didn't think—" She trailed off, probably because she saw it, the way I looked at her. Not like a mother seeing her daughter, but like a woman who had come back from the edge with new eyes. I didn't say much that day. My throat was sore, my body was weak, but my mind was sharper than ever. I let her talk about the doctors, about her constant prayers, about how difficult it had been. "David and I were here every day," she said. That was a lie, and she knew I knew it. A week later, I was discharged. They thought I'd want to go back to the house, my house. Rebecca even offered to drive me. "Just until you get your strength back," she said. I declined. I told her I wanted to stay somewhere quiet for a while. But the truth was, I didn't want to return as the person they expected me to be. I had something entirely different in mind. The last time I had dinner in that house, the chicken was dry and the wine was too sweet. Rebecca had made it clear it was just a small gathering, her, David, and their teenage son Tyler, who barely looked up from his phone. I was seated at the end of the table next to the window that hadn't closed properly in years. A draft slipped in every time the wind picked up, but no one offered to move me. No one even noticed. I might as well have been a piece of inherited furniture they were waiting to replace. Rebecca had prepared lasagna from a frozen box. She heated store-bought garlic bread in the microwave. I remember that because James used to make everything from scratch. Slow, precise, with fresh herbs from the garden, and homemade bread that filled the house with warmth. James's dinners were chaotic, vibrant, alive. This one felt like a corporate lunch meeting. At one point, David raised his glass and toasted to "new chapters." Rebecca joined in. "Mom's finally going to a place where she can relax and be taken care of. It's for the best." I watched Tyler glance up just long enough to roll his eyes before turning his AirPods back on. They had already begun rearranging the living room. My living room. The reading chair I'd spent years breaking in had been moved to the garage. The bookshelves James built for me were now filled with Rebecca's collection of decorative plates. They called it refreshing the space. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. That's not who I am. I simply excused myself after dessert, went to the bathroom, and sat there for a long time, staring at the same tile floor where James and I had slow danced on our 30th anniversary, laughing as we bumped into the sink. His laughter used to fill this house. Now all I could hear was the dishwasher humming and the occasional ping from someone's phone. When I returned to the table, David was explaining the benefits of the senior living community they'd selected. "They even have a swimming pool and movie nights," he said, as if he were describing a resort vacation. Rebecca nodded along, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed brochures, application forms, and a power of attorney document with a blank signature line. I closed the folder slowly and asked one question. "How long have you had this ready?" Rebecca hesitated. "A few weeks. We just wanted to make it easier on you." Easier. That word echoed in my mind all night. Easier for whom? When the evening ended, I left the folder on the table. I didn't say goodbye, just walked out into the cool night air, clutching my purse with hands that suddenly felt stronger than they had in months. Back in my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wedding photo on the dresser. James in his blue suit, me in my simple white dress. That photo had survived 3 moves, 2 renovations, and 1 cancer diagnosis. It belonged to no one but us. I looked around the room. The cedar chest he'd made me for our 5th anniversary, the quilt I'd finished during his final days in hospice, the faint smell of his aftershave that somehow still lingered in the closet. And then I made a decision. They wanted me gone? Fine. But I wasn't going quietly. I reached into my bedside drawer and pulled out my old address book, a relic in the digital age, but one that now held tremendous value. I flipped to the L section and found the name I was looking for, Lisa Harmon. Lisa wasn't just my attorney. She was my best friend's daughter, a woman who had spent every Christmas at our table until she went to law school. She used to call me Aunt Sarah and ask me for advice about boys and careers and life. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since James's funeral, but I knew she would remember. I knew she would understand. I picked up the phone and dialed the number, praying it was still current. 3 rings, then a voice. Lisa Harmon speaking. Lisa, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in months. It's Sarah Caldwell, James's wife. I need your help. There was a pause, then warmth flooded her voice. Aunt Sarah? Oh my God, it's been forever. Mom told me you were sick. Are you okay? No, I said simply. But I'm going to be. Can we meet tomorrow? She didn't hesitate. My office, 10 a.m. I'll clear my schedule. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt since the diagnosis. Purpose. My cancer had gone into unexpected remission. The doctors called it a statistical anomaly, a medical miracle. But I knew better. I had survived for a reason, and that reason was just beginning to take shape. The next morning I woke early, dressed carefully in clothes that hadn't seen daylight in months, and called a taxi. As we drove through familiar streets toward downtown, I watched the world pass by with new eyes. The cherry trees were blooming, pink and defiant against the gray spring sky. I thought about Rebecca, about the little girl who used to beg me to push her higher on the swings, who cried when James taught her to ride a bike and she fell, who wore my pearl earrings at her wedding. I thought about the woman who now sat in my hospital room, calculating the value of my home while I lay there, supposedly dying. And I realized that the greatest tragedy wasn't her betrayal. It was that she had forgotten the most important lesson I ever taught her. That love isn't what you say, it's what you do when no one is watching. Well, I had been watching, and now it was time to act. Lisa's office was in a sleek, high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and importance. I felt out of place in my modest clothes, but the receptionist greeted me warmly and led me straight to Lisa's corner office. Aunt Sarah, Lisa said, rising from behind her desk. She looked like her mother. The same kind eyes, the same no-nonsense posture. She embraced me gently as if I might break. You look. She hesitated. Alive? I offered. That's the part that surprised everyone, myself included. She smiled and gestured to a comfortable chair. Mom told me about the cancer, stage 4 pancreatic. And yet, here you are. Here I am, I agreed, though my daughter seems disappointed by that fact. Lisa's expression shifted. Tell me everything. And so I did. The diagnosis 6 months ago. The prognosis that gave me half a year at best. The treatment that was supposed to merely buy time but had somehow pushed the cancer into remission. And then, the conversation I'd overheard in the hospital. She thought I was unconscious, I explained. They both did. They were planning what to do with the house. With my money, they had already picked out a care facility where they could park me until I died. Lisa took notes, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When I mentioned the power of attorney documents Rebecca had prepared, she stopped writing. Did you sign anything? She asked sharply. No, but she's been pushing. And I'm worried about what might happen if the cancer comes back and I'm truly incapacitated. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Lisa set down her pen. Aunt Sarah, what exactly do you want to do here? Are we talking about changing your will? Setting up a trust? Or something else entirely? I looked out her window at the city below, at the life continuing without pause. I want to protect myself, I said finally. But more than that, I want to teach my daughter the lesson I apparently failed to teach her the first time. That people are not disposable, and that a life has value beyond its assets. And how do you propose we do that? I smiled. The first genuine smile I'd felt in months, by giving her exactly what she wants, and nothing of what she needs. Over the next 2 hours, Lisa and I outlined a plan. It wasn't about revenge. It was about protection and truth. We drafted a new will, one that would replace the simple document James and I had created decades ago. We established a revocable living trust. We filed paperwork to protect my assets from being seized through healthcare proxies or power of attorney. The key, Lisa explained, is to make everything conditional and transparent. We'll create a digital trail that can't be erased or altered. By the time our meeting ended, I felt lighter, as if the weight that had been crushing me since that day in the hospital had finally begun to lift. One more thing, Lisa said as I was leaving. Have you considered telling Rebecca what you heard? I paused at the door. Would it make a difference? Maybe not, but it might give you both a chance to address it. I considered her words. Perhaps someday, but not yet. For now, I need to focus on living, something I wasn't expecting to do much more of 6 months ago. When I left Lisa's office, I didn't return to the house. Instead, I checked into a modest hotel downtown. I called Rebecca that evening. Mom? Her voice held surprise and a hint of irritation. Where are you? I went by the house, and you weren't there. I'm staying with a friend for a while. I lied smoothly. I need some time to think about everything. What friend? Is it someone I know? The suspicion in her tone was unmistakable. Just someone from my support group. Another lie, but a necessary one. I'll be in touch soon. Don't worry about me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I hung up before she could ask more questions. Then I ordered room service, took a long, hot shower, and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I began the process of reclaiming my life. I visited my oncologist, Dr. Reynolds, a kind woman with silver hair and a perpetually worried expression. Mrs. Caldwell, she said, reviewing my latest scans. I have to say, I'm still amazed by your progress. The tumor has continued to shrink. Your blood work is... well, it's not normal, but it's better than we could have hoped for. What does that mean for my prognosis? I asked. She hesitated. Cancer is unpredictable, especially pancreatic cancer. But given your response to treatment and your current condition, I think we can cautiously extend our outlook. Instead of months, we might be looking at years. Years. The word hung between us like a gift I wasn't sure I deserved. Of course, she continued. We'll need to continue treatment and monitoring, and there's always the possibility of recurrence. But for now, I pressed. She smiled. For now, Sarah, you should live your life. That afternoon, I called an old friend from my teaching days, Margaret Chen. We had lost touch after I retired, but she answered on the second ring as if we'd spoken yesterday. Sarah Caldwell, she said warmly, I heard you were sick. I am, but I'm also still here, and I could use a friend. Margaret didn't hesitate. My guest room is yours for as long as you need it. No questions asked. I moved in with Margaret the following day. Her home was small but comfortable, filled with books and art from her travels. It felt safe in a way my own house no longer did. From there, I began to implement the plan Lisa and I had crafted. First, I transferred the majority of my liquid assets into the new trust, with specific provisions for how they could be accessed and used. I kept enough in my regular accounts to avoid raising immediate suspicion. Next, I contacted a real estate attorney and had the deed to the house modified. I didn't remove Rebecca's name entirely. That would have tipped my hand too soon. Instead, I added specific language about occupancy and sale restrictions. Then I waited for Rebecca to notice, It took 3 days. "Mom," she said when she called, her voice tight with controlled anger. "The bank called me about some changes to your accounts. What's going on?" "Just getting my affairs in order," I replied calmly. "The cancer has made me realize how important it is to be prepared." "Prepared for what? And why wasn't I consulted?" "I'm your next of kin, your healthcare proxy." "Not anymore," I cut in. "I've updated those documents as well." Silence stretched between us, taut and dangerous. Then, "Is this because of the care facility?" "Because if you don't like the one we chose, we can look at others. There are some very exclusive communities that—" "I'm not moving to a facility, Rebecca. I'm going to live in my house until I can't anymore. And then I'll make my own decisions about what comes next." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're sick. You need care. You can't just—" "I can. I am. And this conversation is over." I hung up, my hands shaking but my resolve stronger than ever. David called next, his tone reasonable and concerned. The good cop to Rebecca's bad. "Sarah," he said, "we're worried about you. Rebecca's just upset because she cares. We both do. We want what's best for you." "What's best for me," I replied, "is to be treated like a person, not a burden or an asset to be managed." "No one thinks of you that way," he protested. I almost laughed. "Don't lie to me, David. It doesn't suit you." The calls continued over the next few days, escalating in frequency and intensity. Rebecca threatened, pleaded, rationalized. David attempted to mediate. Even Tyler called once, clearly coached by his parents, his teenage awkwardness apparent as he asked when I was coming home. Through it all, I held firm. I attended my treatments. I rested. I had lunch with Lisa to update her on the situation. And I began to plan the next phase. 2 weeks after moving in with Margaret, I returned to the house. Not permanently. I wasn't ready for that yet. But I needed to collect some personal items and to remind myself what I was fighting for. Rebecca was waiting for me. She must have been watching the house, or perhaps one of the neighbors had called her. She sat in the living room, perfectly put together in a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants, her expression a careful mask of concern. "Mom," she said, rising as I entered. "Thank God. We've been so worried." I set down my purse and looked at her. Really looked at her. The daughter I had raised. The woman who had sat at my hospital bedside and calculated the value of my home while I lay there, supposedly dying. "Were you?" I asked quietly. Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or guilt. "Of course we were. You disappeared, changed all your accounts, hired a lawyer. What were we supposed to think?" "I don't know, Rebecca. Maybe that I'm still a person capable of making my own decisions, that I might want some say in how the rest of my life unfolds." She sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. "Mom, you're sick. You're not thinking clearly. The stress of the diagnosis, the treatments, it's affecting your judgment." "My judgment is fine," I replied. "In fact, it's never been clearer." "Then, why are you doing this? Why are you shutting us out when we're just trying to help?" I considered telling her then. Throwing her own words back at her, "He's a burden. Once he's gone, it's just a matter of time." But what would that accomplish? Would it change who she had become? Or would it simply force her to be more careful about what she said out loud? "I'm not shutting you out," I said instead. "I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference." She crossed her arms. "And these boundaries include freezing your accounts, changing your will, moving out of your house without telling anyone where you've gone?" "Yes." Rebecca's composure cracked. "This is insane. You can't just—" "Dad would never have wanted." "Don't!" I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't you dare tell me what James would have wanted. He would have wanted his daughter to care about her mother's dignity and wishes. He would have wanted you to see me as more than a problem to be solved or an inheritance to be divided." Her face flushed. "That's not fair." I've been taking care of you for months, driving you to appointments, managing your medications, putting my own life on hold. And I appreciate that," I said honestly. "But caring for someone doesn't give you ownership of them or their decisions." We stared at each other, the gulf between us wider than it had ever been. Finally, Rebecca shook her head. "Fine. You want independence? You've got it. But don't come crying to us when you can't manage on your own. Don't expect us to drop everything when the cancer comes back. Because it will, Mom." The doctors were clear about that. Her words were meant to wound, to remind me of my vulnerability. But they only strengthened my resolve. "I won't," I promised. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I came to get some clothes and my photo albums." I moved past her toward the stairs, feeling her eyes on my back like daggers. As I packed my things, I heard the front door slam. By the time I came back downstairs, Rebecca was gone. I stood in the empty living room, surrounded by the life James and I had built. The walls we had painted together, the furniture we had chosen, the photographs that traced our journey from newlyweds to parents to grandparents. And for the first time since overhearing that conversation in the hospital, I allowed myself to cry, not for the daughter who had betrayed me, but for the daughter I had lost long before that day. The next week was quiet. No calls from Rebecca or David, no emotional manipulations or legal threats, just silence, which was both a relief and a new kind of pain. I continued my treatments. Dr. Reynolds was cautiously optimistic about my progress. "The tumor is continuing to respond," she told me during my checkup. "It's not gone, but it's significantly reduced." "What are my chances?" I asked. "Realistically." She considered her words carefully. "Pancreatic cancer has one of the lowest survival rates of any cancer. But you're an outlier, Sarah. Your response to treatment has been remarkable. I can't give you certainties, but I can say that your prospects are better than we initially thought." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. And hope was something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a very long time. With that hope came a decision. If I was going to live, truly live, then I couldn't do it from Margaret's guest room or a hotel. I needed to reclaim my space, my home, my life. So 3 weeks after my conversation with Rebecca, I moved back into the house. I had the locks changed first, not out of fear, but as a symbol. This was my home, and entry would be on my terms. I called Rebecca to let her know. The conversation was brief and formal, like speaking to a distant acquaintance rather than my only child. "I'm back at the house," I told her. "I've had the locks changed. If you need to come by, please call first." "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "Is there anything else?" I hesitated. There was so much else. A lifetime of else. But all I said was, "Not right now." That night, I sat on my back porch watching the sunset. The cherry trees James had planted were in full bloom, their pink petals drifting down like snow in the gentle breeze. In the distance, I could hear children playing, their laughter carrying on the evening air. I thought about Rebecca, about the child she had been and the woman she had become. I thought about the conversation in the hospital and everything that had followed. And I realized that while my plan had protected me legally and financially, it hadn't addressed the deeper wound, the betrayal of trust, the fundamental breakdown of our relationship. That would require something more difficult than legal documents and changed locks. It would require truth. And that truth would have to start with me. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and pen, writing a letter to Rebecca. Not an email or a text. Those were too easy to dismiss, too impersonal. A handwritten letter, the kind that required thought and couldn't be deleted with a tap. I wrote about my diagnosis, about lying in that hospital bed hearing her discuss my death as if it were a business transaction. I wrote about the hurt and betrayal, the shock of realizing how she truly saw me, but I also wrote about memories. Her first steps across this very kitchen floor, the night James and I stayed up sewing her Halloween costume, the day she graduated college, and the pride that had swelled in my chest. I wrote until my hand cramped and the pages were filled with my slanted script. Then I sealed the letter in an envelope, addressed it, and set it aside. I wasn't ready to send it yet. Some truths need time to breathe. Instead, I called Lisa. "I need your help with something else," I told her. "Something more personal than legal." "Name it," she said. "I want to find a therapist. someone who specializes in family trauma and cancer patients. And I want to set up a mediation session with Rebecca, if she'll agree to it." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure that's what you want? After everything she's done?" "I'm not doing it for her," I explained. "I'm doing it for me. I need to understand how we got here. And I need to say my piece, with someone neutral present to ensure I'm heard." 2 days later, I had my first appointment with Dr. Elaine Michaels, a therapist who worked specifically with cancer patients and their families. Her office was warm, with plants in every corner and soft light filtering through gauzy curtains. "Tell me why you're here, Sarah," she said after we'd settled in. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I told her everything: the diagnosis, the conversation I'd overheard, the legal maneuvers that followed. I told her about the letter I'd written but hadn't sent, about the mediation I wanted but feared would never happen. "What do you hope to achieve through mediation?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "Not reconciliation," I said finally. "At least, not yet. That feels too distant, too unlikely. But understanding, perhaps, and the chance to speak my truth without being dismissed or manipulated." Dr. Michaels nodded. "And if Rebecca refuses?" "Then I'll know I tried, and I'll focus on healing myself, regardless of what happens with her." We talked for the full hour, and by the end, I felt clearer about my path forward. Not confident, not certain, but clearer. It was a start. The following week brought a surprising development. Tyler, my grandson, showed up at my door one afternoon after school. At 17, he was all lanky limbs and uncertain posture, his father's height with hints of my late husband's features. "Grandma," he said awkwardly when I opened the door. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, studying his face. "Does your mother know you're here?" He shook his head. "Dad does, though. He said it was okay." Interesting. I led him to the kitchen and offered him a snack. Some habits never die, even when your world has been turned upside down. "So," I said, as he devoured a peanut butter sandwich, "what brings you by?" Tyler fidgeted with his napkin. "I heard Mom and Dad fighting about you. About your will and the house and stuff. Mom was really upset." "I imagine she was," I said carefully. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Dad said." He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Dad said Mom was being greedy and that you had every right to protect yourself. They didn't know I was listening." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Seems to be a lot of that going around. Tyler looked confused, so I waved it away. "Never mind. Go on. I just wanted to check on you. Mom said you were losing it, but you seem fine to me. And Dad said the cancer's getting better? Is that true?" The hope in his eyes nearly broke me. "It's responding to treatment," I said carefully. "That's not the same as being cured, but it's better than we expected." He nodded, processing this. "Cool. That's really cool." We sat in silence for a moment, the ticking of the kitchen clock the only sound. Then Tyler cleared his throat. "I miss coming over here," he said quietly. "We used to have Sunday dinners every week, and now everyone's just mad all the time." "I miss that too," I admitted. "Could we maybe, I don't know, hang out sometimes? Just us? I could help with stuff around the house. I'm pretty good at fixing things now." The offer was so earnest, so reminiscent of the little boy who used to follow James around with a toy hammer, helping with projects around the house. I felt tears prick behind my eyes. "I'd like that very much," I told him. Tyler's visit changed something in me. It reminded me that despite Rebecca's betrayal, there were still connections worth preserving, still love that hadn't been corrupted. It gave me hope that not everything was lost. That evening I called David. It was the first time we'd spoken directly since my return to the house. "Sarah," he answered, his tone guarded. "Is everything all right? Tyler came to see me today, I said. He mentioned that you knew about it. David sighed. Yes, he asked, and I didn't see any reason to say no. Was that okay? More than okay. It was wonderful to see him. I paused. Thank you for not standing in the way of that. Look, Sarah. David's voice softened slightly. I know things are complicated right now, but Tyler shouldn't have to suffer because of it. He loves you. I love him too. Another pause. David, can I ask you something? Go ahead. That day in the hospital, when Rebecca said those things, did you agree with her? About me being a burden, about selling the house? The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he answered. I didn't disagree strongly enough, he said. And that's on me. Rebecca was stressed about your diagnosis, about the possibility of long-term care, and she expressed it poorly. I should have pushed back harder. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd expected. Thank you for being honest, I said. For what it's worth, he added. I'm glad the treatment is working. Truly. After we hung up, I thought about our conversation. There was an opening there. A small crack in the wall that had formed between our families. Not with Rebecca. That would take more time, more work. But with David and Tyler, at least, there was potential. The next day, I made a decision. I sent the letter to Rebecca. Not out of anger or revenge, but because truth was the only foundation on which anything could possibly be rebuilt. 3 days passed with no response. Then, a week. I continued my treatments, met with Dr. Michaels, and had Tyler over twice more. Once to help me clean the gutters, and once just to watch a baseball game together, something he and James used to do. On the 10th day after sending the letter, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Rebecca standing there, her face a carefully composed mask. May I come in? She asked stiffly. I stepped back, allowing her to enter. We settled in the living room, sitting across from each other like formal acquaintances rather than mother and daughter. I got your letter, she said, placing it on the coffee table between us. I assumed you had. She folded her hands in her lap. You really heard all of that? In the hospital? Every word. Rebecca looked away, her jaw working. I was tired, she said finally, stressed, scared. I said things I didn't mean. Did you? I challenged gently. Because they sounded very much like things you meant. She flinched. What do you want me to say, Mom? That I'm a terrible daughter? That I was thinking about your house while you were dying? Fine, yes, I did. Is that what you needed to hear? What I need, I said carefully, is for you to understand why that hurt me so deeply. Not just the words themselves, but what they revealed about how you see me, as a problem to be solved, an asset to be divided, rather than as your mother who loves you. Rebecca's composure cracked slightly. You have no idea what it was like, she said, her voice rising. Months of driving you to appointments, managing your medications, fielding calls from doctors while trying to keep my own life from falling apart. Do you know what the survival rate is for pancreatic cancer? Less than 10%. I was being realistic. Realistic, I repeated. Is that what you call planning to sell my house while I was still breathing? Picking out a care facility without consulting me? Trying to get power of attorney over my finances? I was trying to be prepared. No, I said firmly. You were trying to take control. There's a difference. We stared at each other, the truth hanging heavy between us. Then Rebecca's shoulders slumped. I didn't come here to fight, she said. Why did you come? She hesitated. David says I need to make this right. That I'm gonna regret it if I don't. And Tyler, he loves being here with you. He talks about it constantly. And what do you think? I pressed. Not David, not Tyler. You. Rebecca looked down at her hands. I think I was wrong. Not about everything. The stress was real, the fear was real, but the way I handled it was wrong. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was something. A starting point. "I'd like to try mediation," I said, "with a therapist who specializes in family trauma. Would you be willing to do that?" She looked surprised. "Mediation? Like divorce mediation?" "Similar concept. Different context. A neutral third party to help us communicate more effectively." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. "I'll think about it," she said finally. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Like everything else in this new reality, it was complicated, messy, unresolved. After she left, I called Dr. Michaels to update her on the conversation. "It's progress," she assured me. "Small steps, but steps nonetheless." The following week brought my regular appointment with Dr. Reynolds. The news continued to be cautiously optimistic. "The tumor has reduced by another 15%, she told me, showing me the scan. "And your blood markers are improving. I don't want to use the word remission yet, but we're moving in that direction." "So I'm not dying?" I asked bluntly. Dr. Reynolds smiled. "Not imminently, no. In fact, I think we can start discussing long-term treatment plans rather than palliative care." As I drove home from that appointment, I found myself laughing, a wild, unexpected sound that filled the car, not because anything was funny, but because the sheer absurdity of the situation had finally hit me. I had been prepared to die. My daughter had been prepared for me to die. We had both made plans based on that certainty. And now, against all odds, I was living. Not just surviving, but truly living, making choices, setting boundaries, rebuilding relationships on my terms. The cancer that should have ended my life had, ironically, given me the courage to reclaim it. That weekend, I invited David and Tyler over for dinner. Rebecca was notably absent, but her absence felt more like a temporary gap than a permanent void. There was tension, certainly, but also moments of genuine warmth as Tyler regaled us with stories from school and David relaxed enough to reminisce about James. As we ate dessert on the back porch, watching the fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, David turned to me. "She's seeing someone," he said quietly while Tyler was distracted by his phone. "A therapist, I mean. Twice now." "On her own?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "She won't admit it's because of your letter, but the timing speaks for itself." Hope flickered in my chest. Fragile but persistent. That's good to hear. "She's struggling, Sarah, with guilt, with fear, with her own demons. But she's trying, in her way." I thought about that long after they'd gone home. Rebecca, seeing a therapist on her own initiative, taking a step, however small, toward confronting her actions and their consequences. It was more than I had expected, and it offered a slender thread of possibility that perhaps, someday, we might find a way back to each other. The next morning, I sat down at my computer and opened a new document. At the top, I typed "Living Will and Ethical Directive." Below that, I began to outline not just my medical and financial wishes, but my personal ones as well. How I wanted to be treated if the cancer returned, what dignity meant to me, what kind of relationship I hoped to rebuild with my family. It wasn't a legal document, it was a declaration of personhood, a reminder that I was more than my illness, more than my assets, more than the sum of others' expectations. It was a roadmap for the journey ahead, whatever shape it might take. As I wrote, I thought about the words Dr. Michaels had shared in our last session. Healing isn't linear. It's messy and complex, and often involves moving backward before you can move forward. But every step, even the painful ones, brings you closer to wholeness. I wasn't whole yet. The wounds were still raw, the trust still fractured. But I was moving towards something, not the life I had before, but perhaps something equally valuable. A life of clarity and purpose, of boundaries and truth, of relationships based on genuine care rather than obligation or expectation. Outside my window, the cherry trees James had planted swayed in the breeze, their blossoms giving way to the first hints of fruit. Life, continuing, transforming, enduring, just as I was. 3 months after my letter to Rebecca, I received an unexpected text. "Can we meet at Riverside Park tomorrow? 11 a.m. by the old willow tree." It was the first direct communication she'd initiated in weeks. Our interactions had been limited to brief exchanges during Tyler's visits and one tense family dinner where she'd barely spoken. I replied with a simple, yes. Unsure what to expect, but cautiously hopeful. The next morning dawned clear and warm, one of those perfect early autumn days when summer lingers in the air while fall paints the edges of the leaves. I arrived at the park early, settling on a bench near the willow tree, the same tree where James and I had taken Rebecca for picnics when she was small, where we'd celebrated her 16th birthday, where we'd gathered as a family after James's funeral. At precisely 11, Rebecca appeared on the path, her steps hesitant but purposeful. She wore casual clothes, jeans and a simple sweater, rather than her usual polished business attire. It made her look younger, more vulnerable. "Mom," she said, sitting beside me but leaving space between us. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I replied, studying her face. There were shadows under her eyes, and her usual perfect makeup was minimal. "How are you?" She laughed softly, a hollow sound. "Honestly? Not great, but that's part of why I wanted to talk. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. Rebecca twisted her hands in her lap, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "I've been seeing Dr. Lawson, the therapist, for about 2 months now," she said finally. "At first, I went because David insisted, because of Tyler, but then it started to help. She made me look at things I didn't want to see." "What kind of things?" I asked gently. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Things about me, about why I said what I said in the hospital, why I pushed so hard for the care facility, for control over your finances." She paused. "She thinks, and I'm starting to agree, that it wasn't really about the money or the house. Not entirely." A pair of ducks waddled past us, heading for the pond. Rebecca watched them, gathering her thoughts. "When Dad died, you were so strong," she continued. "You handled everything. The funeral, the finances, the house repairs. You never fell apart, never leaned on me. I both admired and resented it. This surprised me." "Resented?" "I wanted to be needed," she admitted, "to be the strong one for once. And then when you got sick, I finally had my chance. I could take charge, make decisions, be the responsible one. But I went too far. I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a problem to solve." The raw honesty in her voice caught me off guard. I'd expected defenses, justifications, perhaps even accusations. Not this level of self-awareness. "When we got the diagnosis," she continued, "I was terrified, not just of losing you, but of the responsibility, the potential years of care, the emotional toll. So I started planning, detaching, treating it like a project to manage rather than my mother's life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "That doesn't excuse what I said," she added quickly. "Nothing excuses that, but understanding why I did it, that's what Dr. Lawson has been helping me with." I reached out hesitantly and placed my hand over hers. "Thank you for telling me this." Rebecca looked at me directly for the first time. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Not just for what I said, but for how I've treated you. For trying to control everything instead of asking what you wanted. For seeing your house and your money instead of you." The apology hung between us, sincere but incomplete. There was still hurt on both sides, trust to be rebuilt, boundaries to be respected. But it was a beginning. "I'd like to try again," she said. "Not to pretend this never happened, but to build something new, something healthier, if you're willing." I thought about the months since my diagnosis, the betrayal, the legal maneuvers, the slow, painful process of reclaiming my life and my dignity. I thought about Tyler's visits, about David's unexpected support, about the therapy sessions that had helped me process my own anger and grief. "I'd like that too," I said finally. "But it won't be easy, and it has to be different." She nodded. "I know. Dr. Lawson suggested that maybe we could try joint sessions? With her or with your therapist, whichever you're more comfortable with." It was exactly what I had proposed weeks ago, what she had initially resisted. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. I think that's a good idea, I agreed. A neutral space where we can both be heard. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the ducks glide across the pond's surface. Then Rebecca spoke again, her voice quieter. How are you feeling? Really? David mentioned your last scan was promising. It was, I confirmed. The tumor continues to shrink. Dr. Reynolds is cautiously optimistic. She's talking about moving to a maintenance protocol rather than aggressive treatment. That's wonderful, Rebecca said, and I could hear genuine relief in her voice. I know I haven't asked enough. About how you're doing, how you're feeling. I've been so wrapped up in your own feelings. I finished for her. I understand that better now. We all respond to crisis differently. She looked at me gratefully. I want to do better. I want to be there for you, not as a manager, but as a daughter. We talked for another hour, longer than we had in years. Not about wills or houses or medical decisions, but about memories, feelings, hopes. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, moments of tension, old wounds that still stung when touched, but there was also laughter, genuine connection, and the tentative foundation of something new. As we prepared to leave, Rebecca hesitated. Would you be open to dinner this weekend? At our house? Tyler's been asking, and David makes a mean lasagna now. I smiled. I'd like that. She hugged me before she left. A brief, careful embrace, but real. As I watched her walk away, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. That would take more time, more work. But possibility. The chance for healing. The next day, I had my regular appointment with Dr. Michaels. I told her about the meeting with Rebecca, about the invitation to dinner, about the suggestion of joint therapy. How do you feel about all this? She asked. I considered the question carefully. Cautious, hopeful, a little scared. Scared of what? Of being hurt again? I admitted. Of letting her back in only to discover nothing has really changed. Of losing the independence and clarity I fought so hard for. Dr. Michaels nodded. Those are valid concerns. How will you protect yourself while still opening up to the possibility of reconciliation? Boundaries, I said immediately. Clear communication. The joint therapy sessions. And most importantly, time. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. And what about you? She pressed. Beyond your relationship with Rebecca, beyond the cancer, what do you want for yourself now? The question caught me off guard. For so long, my focus had been on survival. First physical, then emotional and financial. I hadn't allowed myself to think much beyond that. I want to live, I said slowly, not just exist, not just survive the cancer. I want to really live. To travel again, to volunteer, to rediscover things that bring me joy. Like what? She encouraged. Painting, I said, surprising myself. I used to paint landscapes before Rebecca was born. I was quite good. And gardening. Not just maintaining what's there, but creating something new. And maybe writing. Sharing my story might help others facing similar situations. Dr. Michaels smiled. Those sound like excellent goals. What's stopping you from starting now? Nothing, I realized. Absolutely nothing. That evening, I dug through the attic until I found my old art supplies. Paints dried up, brushes stiff with age, but the easel still intact. I ordered new supplies online, set up the easel by the back window overlooking the garden, and began to sketch. Not a masterpiece, just rough lines and shapes, but it felt like waking up a part of myself that had been dormant for decades. The family dinner that weekend was awkward, but genuine. Tyler dominated the conversation, which seemed to suit everyone fine. David's lasagna was indeed impressive. Rebecca was trying. I could see it in the careful way she asked about my treatment, about my painting, about what help I might need around the house. Afterward, as David and Tyler cleared the table, Rebecca pulled me aside. I've been thinking about what you said in your letter, she said quietly. About dignity and agency. About how I tried to take those from you. I nodded, waiting. "I've spoken to Lisa, your attorney," she continued. "I've formally withdrawn my petition for conservatorship. And I've signed documents acknowledging your full control over your assets and medical decisions." The news shouldn't have surprised me. After all, I'd already secured my legal position through Lisa's help. But the symbolic gesture meant something. "Thank you," I said simply. "It's not enough," Rebecca acknowledged. "But it's a start." Over the next few months, we settled into a new rhythm. Weekly family dinners, bi-weekly joint therapy sessions with Dr. Lawson, who proved adept at navigating the complex emotions on both sides. Tyler began stopping by after school 3 days a week, ostensibly to help with house maintenance, but really just to talk, to connect, to build a relationship independent of his parents. My health continued to improve against all odds. The tumor shrank to a barely detectable mass. The cancer wasn't gone. Drive. Reynolds was clear that it might never be completely eradicated, but it was manageable, more chronic condition than death sentence. "You're what we call an exceptional responder," she explained during one visit. "Some patients, for reasons we don't fully understand, respond to treatment far better than statistical probability would suggest. You're one of those rare cases." I thought about those words often in the weeks that followed. An exceptional responder, not just to the cancer treatment, but to life's hardest challenge, betrayal by someone I loved. I had responded not with bitter resignation or vengeful rage, but with clarity, boundaries, and ultimately, the capacity for conditional forgiveness. 6 months after our meeting in the park, Rebecca and I sat in my newly replanted garden. The cherry trees were bare now, winter approaching, but we were bundled against the chill, sipping hot tea as we reviewed the plans I'd drawn up. "You're really going to do this?" she asked, looking at the detailed sketches for converting part of the house into a studio space where I could teach art classes for cancer patients. "I am," I confirmed. Dr. Reynolds connected me with the oncology support network at the hospital. They've been looking for programs that combine creative expression with emotional healing. Rebecca studied the plans. "It's amazing, Mom, truly. But won't it be a lot of work?" "With your condition," I held up a hand. "My condition is stable. I have energy. I have purpose. And most importantly, I have time. Time I never expected to have. I intend to use it." She nodded, understanding. "How can I help?" "And before you answer," she added quickly, "this isn't me trying to take over. This is me asking how I can support what you want." The distinction wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, she would have started making calls, arranging contractors, taking charge without asking. Now she was offering assistance on my terms. "I could use help with the website," I said, "and maybe some connections through your nonprofit work for potential funding sources." "Consider it done," she said, then hesitated. "And maybe I could join one of the classes sometimes? Not to intrude, just to share it with you." The request surprised me, touched me. I'd like that. Later that evening, alone in my studio space, still more concept than reality, but taking shape, I thought about the extraordinary journey of the past year. From diagnosis to overheard betrayal, from legal maneuvering to tentative reconciliation, from preparing to die to learning how to truly live, the cancer had given me an unexpected gift: clarity, the ability to see what and who truly mattered, the courage to set boundaries, and the wisdom to allow for growth and change, the perspective to understand that even the deepest wounds can become channels for healing, not just for ourselves but for others. I picked up a brush and began to paint. Not a realistic landscape this time, but an abstract interpretation of the past year's emotional terrain. Dark valleys of despair, jagged peaks of anger, and gradually, emerging patches of light. Possibility, hope, a future I hadn't dared imagine. As I worked, I thought about the words I'd written in my journal just that morning. Sometimes it takes nearly dying to teach us how to live. Sometimes it takes betrayal to show us the truth. And sometimes the greatest act of love is not blind forgiveness but clear-eyed acceptance of what is, what was, and what might still be. My daughter had said, "Just die already," when I got cancer. But I didn't die. I lived more fully, more authentically, more powerfully than before. And in that living, I found not just the strength to survive, but the wisdom to thrive, the courage to forgive, and the clarity to build a life on my own terms. The next morning, I woke to a text from Rebecca. Contractor coming at 10 to give estimate for studio conversion. I'll be there to let them in if you have treatment. No decisions without you. Love you. I smiled at those last two words. Simple, powerful, still being earned, but genuinely offered. We had a long way to go, my daughter and I. Trust broken is never easily restored. But we were on the path, step by careful step, toward something new and real and honest. And that, I realized, was the true miracle. Not just surviving cancer against the odds, but finding a way back to love through the hardest of truths. Not erasing the past, but building a future that acknowledged it, while refusing to be defined by it. As I prepared for the day ahead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not just for the studio project or the art classes, but for life itself, with all its complexity, its pain, its joy, its unlimited potential for transformation. My cancer journey wasn't over. My relationship with Rebecca wasn't healed overnight. There would be setbacks, difficult days, moments when old wounds reopened, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced death and betrayal and emerged stronger, clearer, more fully myself than I had ever been. "Just die already," she had said. And in a way, I had the old me, the one who measured love by sacrifice, who confused silence with peace, who valued harmony over truth. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who understood that true love demands both compassion and boundaries, both forgiveness and accountability. Someone who knew, beyond any doubt, that life's greatest challenges can become its most powerful teachers, that even in our darkest moments, we have choices, that it's never too late to reclaim our dignity, our purpose, our joy. And that perhaps is the most important lesson of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.